Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 37, a construction foreman in Denver. It was Sunday afternoon. The television was on low from a late game. Rain tapped the deck and the gutters made their usual hiss. I was at the kitchen table finishing a second cup of coffee and sorting the week's schedule for my crew. She stood near the living room doorway with her arms folded and that half smile she had started using when she wanted to test me. She said, "Bet you won't actually leave." I didn't answer. I put my phone face down, stood up, and walked past her toward the bedroom. My heart rate stayed steady. No questions. I opened the closet, pulled down the gray hardshell suitcase, set it on the bed, and unzipped it. From the hallway, she laughed once, short and confident, as if this was a bit to end our weekend. I didn't react. I opened the top left drawer of her dresser and started folding the shirts she wore to the studio. I stacked them in a clean line in the right side of the case. She came to the doorway and leaned on the frame. "You're really going to make a scene over a joke?" I kept working. I moved to the second drawer, took out jeans, matched them with belts, rolled them tight, and placed them across the bottom. I added the black cardigan she wore to meetings and the blue one she took when the office ran cold. The room smelled faintly of her citrus lotion. I stayed on task. She washed my hands for a few seconds, then stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That's when it registered for her that none of what I was packing was mine. "What are you doing?" she asked. I kept my tone even. I didn't answer her question, and I didn't add any commentary she could twist. I reached for the top of the closet shelf, pulled down the shoe bags, and selected the pairs she used most. I wrapped each pair in the bags, set them sole to sole, and seated them along the outer edge of the case. I laid the dust bag with her favorite heels flat on top of the sweaters to keep the heel tips from marking fabric. I moved without hurry and without pauses for argument. She stepped in and touched the stack of shirts. "Stop. That's mine." I set the shirts back in the exact order they had been in and closed the elastic cross strap. I took her toiletries pouch from the bathroom drawer and placed it on the dresser, then returned to gather her makeup bag, hairbrush, and the travel-size bottles she preferred. I added cotton pads, a box of bandages, and the prescription bottle from her nightstand. I made sure the label matched the refill she was due to pick up this week, so there would be no scramble later. I coiled her curling iron cord and zip-tied it. It all went into the upper compartment. She reached toward the suitcase again. "You're being ridiculous." I held the lid with my left hand and secured the inner zipper with my right. No struggle. I placed her work ID and office keycard into the small mesh pocket so she wouldn't have to dig on Monday. On the desk, I found her laptop charger and headphones. Both went into the front sleeve. I checked the watch case on her dresser and selected the two she actually wore, leaving the others in the tray. I set her small jewelry roll beside the watches and closed the clasp. She shifted to a different tone. "We can talk." I nodded once and kept packing. I wasn't rushing her out. I was ending a pattern. In the last 2 months, she had ignored plans, blocked out weekends for self-care without including me, and brushed off any attempt to speak plainly. At dinner with friends last week, she joked about upgrading partners. When I asked her privately why she would say that, she told me not to be sensitive. Today she had tried one more nudge. I was finished with nudges. I opened the hall closet and brought out the small luggage tag set. On one tag, I wrote her name and her sister's address. I left my number in the notes line. I placed the tag beside the case. In the entry tray, I found her spare house key and her gym card. Both went on the dresser for now. I took her purse from the hook near the door, emptied the old receipts, and checked for her wallet, insurance card, and transit pass. I added a phone charger and a portable battery from my drawer. I placed the purse on the bed. She walked to the kitchen and back, started to say something, then stopped. The television commentators droned through a review of a turnover. The dryer in the laundry room buzzed. I went to the laundry, folded the clean sports leggings she had washed that morning, and placed them in the case. I added a hoodie and a rain jacket from the coat closet. The forecast for the week showed 2 cold mornings. She would need layers. She leaned over the suitcase again and picked up the blue sweater. "Where am I supposed to go?" I handed her the sweater and waited. She didn't put it back or pack it herself. She just held it. I opened the small safe where we keep passports and copies of documents, confirmed hers was there, and closed it again. I wasn't shipping her across a border. I was giving her the result she kept predicting. I carried the suitcase to the living room and set it beside the door. Wheels locked. Handle down. She followed me. So after everything, you're going to throw me out? I shook my head. No one is throwing you anywhere. I kept my voice even. You said I wouldn't leave. You were right. I'm not going anywhere. You asked for distance. I'm making it simple. I set the purse on top of the suitcase and slid the luggage tag under the handle. I placed her spare key next to it. She stood with her arms loose at her sides. Her expression had no humor in it now. I returned to the kitchen, dumped out the cold coffee, and washed the mug. I dried it, put it back, and wiped the small ring of moisture left on the counter. I opened the fridge and moved the leftover containers to a single shelf so there wouldn't be a mess if I closed the kitchen early tonight. I took out my notebook and drew a line under the tasks I had planned to complete. I checked off the remaining items I had time for and put the notebook back in the drawer. From the doorway, she said, "You're acting extreme." I looked at the wall clock and then at her. No yelling, no names, and no broken things. I'm packing a bag for you. That's not extreme. I walked past her to the bedroom, grabbed the phone charger from her nightstand, and put it in the front pocket of the suitcase. I added a pack of tissues and a small umbrella from the hall rack. I zipped the case closed and set it upright again by the door. She stood very still. I could see she was calculating who to call, where to stay, what to say to them. That was her work, not mine. I opened the front closet and pulled out her rain boots. They were clean. I put them next to the suitcase. I checked the porch for any packages with her name on the label. One padded envelope had arrived. I set it on the entry table within reach. I returned to the kitchen and picked up my phone. Messages from my brother and one from a crew lead about Monday's load-in times sat unread. I replied to the work text with the updated times. I told my brother I might need him later for a quick pickup if her sister couldn't help. He sent a thumbs up. I put the phone away. She asked, "Is this what you really want?" I looked at the suitcase, then at her. I want a life that doesn't run on insults and tests. I didn't add anything else. I didn't raise my volume or soften my tone. I went to the thermostat and set the night program, then to the back door to make sure it was locked. I flipped off the porch light. I stood by the table again and took a breath. The house was orderly. Nothing had been thrown. Nothing had been damaged. A bag stood packed at the door. She looked at me, then at the bag, then back at me. For weeks, she had treated our home as a place where respect could be suspended and restored at her convenience. I had answered every small jab with patience. My answer now was different and clear. I wasn't leaving the house. I wasn't leaving my steadiness. I was done waiting for basic regard. She reached for the handle, then stopped. She didn't have any more lines. I sat down at the table and opened my notebook to tomorrow's page. I wrote 3 items. Call the bank to separate discretionary spending, remove authorized access on the card she uses for online orders, and review the calendar for any joint bookings that needed canceling. I tore a clean sheet from the back, wrote her sister's address and phone number, and slid it across the table in case she needed to send for the rest of her things later. She finally spoke in a low voice. "You're serious?" I nodded. "Yes." I stood, walked to the door, picked up the suitcase handle, and rolled it forward a foot so it rested easy. I didn't touch her arm. I didn't guide her steps. I returned to the kitchen, turned off the television, and pulled the sink plug so the basin drained. I heard the small clack of the suitcase handle settling back into place. I didn't turn to watch. My part was finished for today. The door, the bag, the order of the room, and the absence of argument covered everything that needed to be covered in this first move. She started with a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You proved your point. Put it back." I stood by the door with the suitcase upright and the handle lowered. I said nothing. I walked back to the bedroom, opened the dresser again, and gathered the rest of her work tops. I used the packing cubes from the top shelf and filled one with undergarments and tights so she wouldn't be digging later. I placed the cube flat and zipped it. She followed me in. "This is ridiculous." Over a single line. "It wasn't a single line," I said. My tone stayed even. "You've been saying the same thing in different words for months." "That's not true. You said I wouldn't leave." "You were right. I'm not leaving." She moved to the bed and lifted the lid halfway, testing whether I'd stop her. I kept my hand on the frame and waited. She set the lid back down and stepped away. I took her weekend bag from the closet and filled it with gym items, toiletries duplicates, and a pair of flats. I put today's mail on the nightstand and removed the coupons and flyers addressed to both of us. Only her items went with her. Where do you expect me to go? You can decide. Your sister's address is on the paper by the table. If you need a ride, I'll drive you. If you want privacy, I'll call a car. So you are kicking me out. I'm not. I'm giving you the space you asked for. She tried a different angle. You're doing this to punish me. No. Then why pack my things? So you don't turn a boundary into a debate. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. She grabbed it and turned away to answer. He's being dramatic, she told whoever was on the line. He packed a bag. She listened for a minute, then said, "No, I'm fine," and ended the call. She texted fast, thumbs moving in short bursts. I went to the office shelf and retrieved a blank notepad. I wrote an itemized list: clothing, shoes, toiletries, chargers, laptop cord, rain jacket, work ID, transit pass. I left a line for anything she would request later so we could track it. She came back into the room, set the phone down, and crossed her arms. You're making yourself look controlling. I'm keeping this direct. No arguing. You sound like you rehearsed this. I wrote down what I can accept. She took a step toward me. Is there someone else? No. Then why are you so calm? Because this is clear. She tried to pull shirts out of the suitcase. I waited until she stopped, then put them back in the order I had them. I slipped the list into the outer pocket and closed it. I took a breath and returned to the kitchen for a glass of water. She trailed behind me. At the table, she said, "You don't get to rewrite what I meant. It was a joke. You use that word after every cut. So now I'm abusive? I didn't say that. I'm saying I won't live this way." She called her sister. I heard her sigh. He packed a bag. No, mine. He says I wanted space. She listened. I don't know. Maybe. She ended the call and looked down at the phone for a long moment. She can pick me up after work tomorrow, she said. I can drive you now, I replied. I have things to do here. You can do them tonight and leave in the morning. Or you can leave now. Your choice. She tried tears next. They came fast, then stopped. I handed her a tissue and waited. She wiped her face and set the tissue on the table. You're really ending it over a sentence. I'm ending the pattern. What happens after that is up to both of us. She took a seat and stared at the suitcase. The television was still off. The house felt quiet. She broke the silence. Say something I can work with. I'll keep everything civil. If you want counseling, you can email me openings that fit both schedules. I'll confirm or decline in writing. If you want separation, I'll speak to my lawyer and keep it businesslike. You have a lawyer? I have a name and a file. I haven't signed anything. When did you do that? After the dinner with our friends. She winced. You're still on that? Yes. I was trying to be funny. It didn't land. She walked into the bedroom and came back with a small framed photo from our second year. She set it on the table between us. This just stops now. It stops until respect returns. And if it doesn't, then we finish this without drama. She went to the bedroom again and closed the door. I heard drawers open and close. After a few minutes, she emerged with a makeup bag and a notebook. She placed them in the suitcase without looking at me and zipped the front pocket. She stood there, hands still, breathing steady. I'm not ready to go, she said. Then take the guest room tonight, I replied. Door closed. No conversation. We both sleep. Tomorrow you decide. You'll lock me out. No. She hovered in the doorway. What else are you changing? Tomorrow I'll remove authorized access to my personal accounts. Joint household bills stay covered. I won't fund social spending for a separation. So I get cut off. You get what you asked for. Space. She shook her head. This is cruel. It's clear. Another message arrived on her phone. She read it, typed, deleted, then placed the phone face down. She picked up the suitcase handle and let it go. If I leave, you won't chase me? No. You won't text. I'll respond to logistics only. So that's it. For now. I took my notebook and wrote the time and a short summary. Packed essentials, offered ride, guest room option, counseling path, financial boundary. I dated it. I put the notebook back in the drawer. She watched me do it. You're documenting? Yes. For court. For clarity. She stood by the door again. Say you don't want me to go. I want respect back in this house. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer that matters. She stayed very still. I went to the hallway, turned down the thermostat, and shut off the entry light. I carried the suitcase back to the bedroom so it wouldn't block the door in the night. I set it beside the dresser where she could reach it in the morning. I left her purse on the chair and the printed list on top. I stepped out and gave her the room. In the kitchen, I set 2 glasses on the counter and filled one with water. I left the other empty in case she wanted it. I checked the back door again and returned to the table. The rain had stopped. Street noise drifted in through the vent. I wrote 2 appointments in my calendar. Call the bank at 9, call the lawyer at noon for a consultation slot later in the week. I closed the calendar and powered down the screen. She came out once more and stood across from me. "Last chance to walk this back," she said. "I'm not walking anything back." She held my eyes for a long second, then turned and went down the hall to the guest room. The door clicked shut. I listened for a minute to be sure she wasn't crying. The house stayed quiet. I rinsed my glass, placed it on the rack, and turned off the kitchen light. I texted her sister a single line. "Bag is packed. She can stay in the guest room tonight. Please call her." Then I put my phone on the charger and sat at the table in the dark for 1 minute to make sure I wasn't acting out of anger. My hands were steady. My thinking was straight. The next move would come in the morning. Tonight, I would stick to the plan we both understood now, whether or not she liked the form it took. I woke at 6 o'clock. The guest room door was closed. I brewed coffee, reviewed my notes from last night, and set the day's plan. At 8:30, I knocked once on the guest room door and said through it that I'd leave the house by 9 for calls and errands, and that her sister had my message. No reply came. I left a glass of water on the hall table and went to the kitchen. After that, I called the bank. I removed her authorized access from my personal cards and created a separate subaccount for household expenses. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, and groceries stayed funded. Restaurant charges, retail, and travel moved off the joint funding. The representative confirmed the changes and sent the updated terms by email. I filed the PDF in a folder labeled Separation, Finance, and printed a 1-page summary for the house file. Next, I drafted a short email to her with the subject, "Next 7 days." I kept it precise. Guest room tonight. Sister pickup available anytime. 2 options for counseling providers with links to their calendars, and a request that any scheduling be handled by email between 9 and 5. I added the boundary that we would not debate in person and that I would not respond to messages that were not about logistics. I closed with a line stating that if she wanted separation, I would proceed through counsel, and if she wanted counseling, she could propose 3 appointment windows. I proofread it twice, attached the itemized packing list, and hit send. At noon, I called the attorney whose name sat in my notes from last week. The receptionist offered a consultation on Thursday. I accepted and received an intake form. It asked for dates, assets, and any prior agreements. I filled in what I had and left the sections about support blank pending advice. I scanned copies of the deed, car titles, and last year's tax return and saved them to the same folder. I printed a checklist so I could track what else the attorney would need. Before I left my desk, I opened our streaming accounts and changed the passwords. I created a new household profile for necessities and deleted add-on channels. I sent her a line in the same email thread. House profile remains. Personal profiles discontinued during separation. I set up a shared spreadsheet for household bills with due dates, amounts, and responsible party. I entered my name beside mortgage, electricity, gas, water, and internet. I left blank fields for anything she wanted to assume during or after separation. I shared the sheet to her email with view access and invited edits by comment only. I boxed framed photos that held both of us and placed the box on the top shelf of the hall closet. I labeled it with the date and her name. I left her personal desk items untouched. I locked my office file cabinet and moved my passport back to the safe. I replaced the Wi-Fi password and created a guest network. I printed the guest credentials and left them on the hall table. At 2 p.m., I sent a brief text to her sister. Counseling options and logistics sent by email. I'll be out from 3 to 4. If pickup tonight is easier, I can load the car. She replied that she could come after work if needed. I answered that either tonight or tomorrow morning would be fine. At 3 p.m., I stepped out to the hardware store for boxes and a roll of tape in case she wanted to pack more tonight. When I returned, the guest room door was open. She stood in the hallway with the suitcase upright and her purse on the chair. She said she had a work call at 4 and needed privacy. I told her she could use the bedroom or the guest room, her choice. She chose the bedroom, closed the door, and began her call on speaker. I heard her say she would work remote tomorrow and that she was handling a personal matter. She spoke firmly. No mention of me. When the call ended, she returned to the kitchen. You changed the streaming passwords, she said. Yes. This is petty. It's consistent with separation. So you don't want me here at all. You have the guest room today? After today, we move to the plan in my email. She opened the email on her phone and read in silence. She scrolled twice, then set the phone face down. I'm not responding on a schedule like I work for you. The schedule is for both of us. It keeps the steps clean. And if I ignore it, then I proceed through counsel. She picked up the suitcase handle, then put it down. Book the counseling then, she said. 1 session. I'm not promising more. Send me 3 times that fit next week. I said. I'll confirm 1. You book it. You request. I confirm. She stared at the sink for a long moment, then nodded once. Fine. She typed for a minute and said she could do Tuesday at 5 p.m., Wednesday at noon, or Friday at 9 a.m. I forwarded both counselors' links and asked her to choose which practice. She chose the first. I opened the calendar, selected Wednesday at noon, and booked it. The confirmation arrived within a minute. I forwarded the confirmation to her and added it to my phone. At 4:45, I gathered the boxes and set them by the guest room. I placed a roll of tape and a marker on top. I left a notepad on the dresser for any additional items she wanted me to bring out later. I did not stand in the doorway or hover. I walked back to the kitchen, put rice on the stove, and chopped vegetables for dinner. I set a plate for her and one for me. She stood at the island and watched. I don't want to eat with you, she said. You can take your plate to the guest room. I don't want a plate. Understood. I ate, cleaned my dish, wrapped the second plate, and placed it in the fridge. I wiped the counter and table. At 6 o'clock, I texted her sister. If you want to pick her up tonight, the bag is ready. If not, she has the guest room. The reply said she was tied up at work and that tomorrow morning was better. I answered that I would be out of the way and could carry the suitcase down when she arrived. She came into the kitchen again. You've turned our home into a checklist, she said. Checklists stop confusion. You're not even angry. I'm focused. She asked where I would sleep. In my room, I said. You have the guest room until pickup. If you stay longer than tomorrow, we move to the plan in the email. And if I refuse, I won't argue. I'll proceed through counsel. At 8:30, I sent her a final email for the day. Counseling confirmed for Wednesday at 12. Guest room available tonight. Pickup window tomorrow between 8 and 10 per your sister. I will be out from 8 to 9 for a site check, then home to help with the bag if requested. I attached the household spreadsheet link again and signed my name. Before bed, I took photographs of the common areas, the bedroom, and the guest room with a timestamp. I saved them to the same folder. I placed my phone on the charger, checked that doors and windows were secure, and turned off the lights. On the way down the hall, I paused by the guest room door. Your sister will text you in the morning, I said. I'll be in the driveway at 8 to move the bag. There was a quiet okay from inside. I slept without interruption. At 6:30 I woke, dressed for work, and reviewed the calendar. The counseling appointment stood on Wednesday. The legal consult stayed on Thursday. The bank changes were complete. The plan was in writing. I wasn't waiting on moods or vague promises. I had given her the distance she kept announcing and set terms that kept both of us steady. I would hold those terms without speeches, without scenes, and without late-night negotiations. The next move would be hers, but the structure was mine, and it was already in place. I set the suitcase by the door and texted her a single line about pickup. When her sister arrived, I carried the case to the vehicle, placed it flat, and stepped back. My wife came out with a tote and got in without speaking. The vehicle pulled away. The house held steady. I stripped the guest bed, started the wash, wiped the dresser, and filed the packing list with the notes from the night before. Messages started soon after. Enjoy the empty house. I did not answer. Then, you can stop pretending you're calm. When the third message accused me of using money to control, I replied with the policy I had already written: household bills covered, personal spending off joint accounts. I saved the thread and moved on with my day. I took a short call from a mutual friend who wanted a version of events. I gave none. We're taking space, and counseling is scheduled. He tried to push for details. I repeated the same sentence. He stopped. She returned that evening with 2 friends and asked to collect more clothes. I opened the door for her alone. I handed her a folded box and tape and asked her to label contents. She paced the closet, filled the boxes, and tried to reopen the argument about the dinner joke. Email, I said. She sealed the boxes and left. I logged the pickup and the items, then put the boxes in the entry to keep the rooms clear. The first counseling session took place as planned. We arrived separately and sat apart. The counselor asked for dates, examples, and clear requests. My wife opened with, "He's punishing me." The counselor asked her to name specific actions. She listed the suitcase and the account changes. The counselor turned to me. I explained the purpose. In the pattern, separate emotional conflict from logistics, and make every step visible. The counselor then asked my wife to explain the line about me never leaving and the string of similar remarks. She said it was nothing. The counselor asked for dates. I read them off my sheet and stopped. The counselor asked what each of us wanted. I said we either restore respect through clear structure or we separate. She said she wanted to reset. The counselor asked how. She had no plan. The counselor proposed a trial. No insults, weekly check-ins with a written agenda, counseling attendance, and no social outings that could complicate the process. I added one condition. She would live at her sister's during the trial. The counselor called the request clear and workable. My wife said she would think about it and respond in writing. After the session, she sent a photo from our second year and wrote, "Remember this?" I ignored it. Then a line about regret. I ignored that too. Later she wrote that she would accept the full trial if I sent a simple document with the terms. I sent it, signed my copy, and left space for hers. She asked about the non-disparagement clause. I said it protected both of us. She signed and returned the document. I countersigned and filed it. The public noise eased once a document existed. Her social pages went quiet. A friend who had sent a hostile message earlier sent a softer one. "I didn't know you offered counseling." I did not respond. Neighbors kept their distance, which helped. Her mother stayed neutral. Her sister dealt with logistics only. That left my wife without an audience that would carry her story. She began sending fewer messages filled with blame and more questions about how to handle basic steps. The first written agenda arrived late and thin. "Let's just talk," she wrote. I returned it and asked for the completed template. She sent it close to the deadline with short statements. On the video call, I stayed to the document. Finances stable, house operations normal, counseling confirmed, and social plans paused unless cleared together. She tried to return to the suitcase. "Not on the agenda," I said. She went quiet and stayed within the rules for the rest of the call. That shift mattered more than any expression of regret. Another result showed up at her next pickup. She arrived on time, alone, and asked for a short window to collect a few specific items. No extra people and comments about control. She stood in the doorway and asked if I hated her. "No," I said. "We're following the agreement." She asked if the trial guaranteed a return. "Nothing is guaranteed," I said. "Performance decides." She nodded and left with a labeled box. I logged the items and closed the door. She tested the rules once more with a request to meet a friend. I asked for the friend's name and a clear plan for avoiding third-party pressure. She offered to choose a different friend or skip the outing. She chose to skip it. The counselor noted the change at the next session without praise or criticism, only as data. I noted it on my sheet too, because this process was not about feelings first. It was about conduct that could be tracked and reviewed. The group around her adjusted. Without one-sided stories to pass around, the calls faded. A mutual friend asked again if we were okay. "We have a clear plan," I said. "That's what we have." He accepted it. When she tried guilt, it fell flat against the document. When she tried charm, it had no place in the agenda. When she tried to provoke, I sent her back to email. The result was not humiliation for her. The result was a limit she could understand and follow. She could come, collect, attend, and respond. Or she could choose to violate the agreement and watch the separation paperwork go in. The choice stayed visible. That visibility took away the advantage she had when everything lived in comments, moods, and scenes. By the end of the first week of the trial, the noise had dropped to almost nothing. She asked concrete questions: how to handle shared subscriptions, which day to send her share of a small bill, what to bring to the next session. She stopped sending late-night lines with the old tone. I did not measure her steps against a running resentment. I checked tasks off a list and enforced boundaries that did not bend when emotions rose or fell. If she met the terms, the next part would occur. If she failed, the next part would occur in a different form. Either way, the period of her daring me to act had ended. The structure removed the stage she used for pressure and replaced it with simple steps that judged both of us. No crowd, just a paper trail and a clock that did not care about excuses. The change in her face the last time she stood in the doorway told me enough. There was no test. There was a person who understood that the plan was real and that I would not step outside it to calm a moment or rescue an evening. What came next would depend on what she did, not what she promised. That was the point of consequences. They arrive without speeches and they don't wait for permission. Here, they were simple and visible. Distance, rules, attendance, and the end of special treatment. With that, the old approach had no place to land. The trial period delivered information. She attended sessions. She showed up for the check-ins. She kept most messages inside the rules. But each improvement depended on reminders, templates, and the presence of a third party. When the counselor asked for one clear statement of responsibility, she summarized conflict as mutual tension and moved past the remark about me never leaving. When I asked for one change she would maintain without monitoring, she said she would try to be lighter. The counselor asked for a concrete behavior. She could not name one. Midway through the trial, she asked to end the non-disparagement clause. I said no. She asked to scrap the weekly agenda. I said no. She asked to come back to the house before the end date. I said no. None of those refusals came with raised volume or insult. They came with a document attached. Each time I sent the same sentence. We work the agreement to the end, then decide. By the third session, the counselor shifted to outcome planning. The counselor asked us to write separate closing statements and to submit them in advance. I wrote 3 paragraphs. First, the pattern that led to separation. Second, the steps I needed to see without enforcement. Third, the decision I would make if those steps did not occur. I listed behaviors. No mocking remarks in private or public, no tests disguised as jokes, no third-party involvement in disputes, and scheduling through shared tools without pushback. I wrote that I would not negotiate these points or carry them alone. I signed and sent it. Her closing statement arrived short and vague. She wrote that we had grown tense, that she missed the feeling of ease, and that she wanted to go back to normal. The counselor asked her in session what normal meant. She said dinners without checklists and weekends without rules. The counselor asked how that could exist while protecting the boundary that started this process. She did not answer. The counselor turned to me. I said that if the boundary required a list to survive, then the relationship needed a different shape. The room went quiet. No one argued. The final week looked like a steady exit. She coordinated pickups through her sister without making a scene. She met the remaining sessions on time. She stopped trying to reopen the suitcase discussion. She sent 2 neutral questions about bills and 1 about a shared subscription. I answered all 3 and kept the thread short. I did not add commentary. 2 days before the end date, I emailed her a 1-page decision letter. I thanked her for attending the sessions and for following the structure. I wrote that the structure worked because it was external and enforced. I wrote that I needed a partner who protected respect without prompts and without third-party supervision. I stated that I would sign the separation agreement and that I would not extend the trial. I gave her 3 pickup windows for the rest of her items and listed what remained in the house by room. I included a copy of the agreement with dates and the occupancy clause highlighted. I closed with a simple sentence. I will keep this civil and businesslike. She replied with a short message. She said I was throwing away a history. I wrote back with 1 line. History without respect is not a basis. She asked for one last dinner to talk without forms. I declined and pointed to the agreement. She stopped writing for the day. I met the attorney, reviewed the final draft, and signed. The agreement granted me sole occupancy, set a schedule for item retrieval, split accounts cleanly, and barred both of us from public commentary. It included a counseling clause that could be reopened by joint request after the legal process if both parties agreed in writing. I paid the remaining fee and left with copies. I filed 1 set at home and sent her the electronic version with the signature page. She signed the next day. No message came with it. Her sister texted me a pickup time for the last boxes. I stacked them in the entry with a printout of the inventory and a small tool kit for disassembling a shelf she wanted. When they arrived, I carried the boxes to the vehicle. My wife stood by the gate and watched. There was no speech. I changed the door code and updated the access list for the alarm company. I removed her from the emergency contacts, added my brother, and sent the new list to my supervisor at work. I updated my will to match the agreement. I closed the last joint subscription and forwarded her mail to her sister's address. I set a new household budget without a second column. Nothing about those steps felt dramatic. They were administrative, necessary, and final. The counselor sent a follow-up note offering future sessions if requested by both parties. I archived it. The mutual friend who had wanted gossip early on sent a question mark. I deleted the message. A neighbor waved and did not ask for an update. I watered the plants, replaced 2 light bulbs, and scheduled a duct cleaning that I had put off for months. The house went back to a normal routine. On the first weekend after signatures, I woke without an agenda from anyone else. I went for a run, cleared the inbox, and cooked a simple breakfast. I moved the remaining photo box to the hall closet and left it there without opening it. I reviewed next week's work schedule and added 2 personal tasks that had nothing to do with conflict: a dental appointment and a class at the community center. I wrote them on the calendar and closed it. She sent one more message a few days later. She wrote that she wanted to talk sometime off the record. I responded with 2 lines: "I wish you well." All future contact through counsel or email about logistics. I blocked unknown calls and kept her address and my contacts for mail only. When people say a marriage ends over one sentence, they ignore everything that made the sentence possible. This ended because a boundary had to exist without reminders. Because a promise had to mean the same thing in a quiet room as it did in front of other people. Because trust is not a debate topic. I packed her things when she dared me to move. I kept the plan when she tested it. I signed when the result became clear. Respect is not a gift I give to myself after someone else agrees to it. It is a standard I hold whether or not anyone else signs on. And for the first time in a long time, nothing in my day depends on someone else's joke.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.